Great, man. Well, we're here today to talk about your new album, Freedom, on Outside In. I got that right? I always want to say Inside Out. Outside In. When was it released? When did you release it? Last month?
Yeah, August 7th.
All right. You've joined the ranks of people releasing albums during the COVID lockdown experience.
Yep.
Now, it's an eclectic record. You've got a lot of, I would say, different styles of music on there. But in my ear, and I think you might have taken a little flack for that from one review, but to my ear, it sounds very cohesive. Like, it sounds like everything belongs there, even though you've got so many different instruments and different bands in some respects. I'm not exactly sure how much the personnel changes, but I wanted to start out by asking you, how do you think about what pieces to put on an album or how to put this together? And do you think about the cohesion despite, let's say, varying styles of music on one record?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, those are not really considerations that I really think about as far as, like, on an album level. I mean, like, I was really just thinking about making it like a performance, you know? Like, how would I keep people's attention in real life if we were playing a set of music? So, like, you know, it starts off with the fast up-tempo swing, and then we do something different right away. I think the next tune is a 7/4, like Latin samba type feel, and then after that is like the kind of more modern jazz tune, and then like a more fusion thing, and then the ballad, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, I mean, my idea behind the album was, number one, just picking a good mix of the music that I've written that I think is actually good enough for an album. But also, I've been writing for such a long time. I started writing a lot of septets music since like 2010. And so it's been like 10 years of culminating. So, like, this album, a lot of the music is actually pretty old. Some of this stuff is like a little bit more recent. So I was kind of trying to get a good mix of like my older compositions that I think deserve to be recorded, while also showcasing some of the stuff that I've been doing more recently, while also taking into consideration trying to keep people's interest from start to finish. So
Sure.
those were like the main considerations.
Yeah, it's interesting, the idea of treating the album almost as a performance, because when we play gigs, it would be completely unsurprising to do a bossa nova followed by a swing tune followed by a whole, like, you could have a Fats Waller tune next to a Wayne Shorter tune and almost nobody's going to bat an eye. But
Exactly.
yeah, so it's just, I guess it's the same principle. Put an album together. Is this your debut album as a leader?
Yeah.
Cool. So how long have you been working on it? Or maybe what's the oldest tune you got on here?
Yeah, I mean, 2010 is probably, or maybe 2009 even. Actually, the ballad I wrote on the album called Just Let Go, I wrote like the summer of my freshman year of undergrad. So that was like 2009, probably like around, maybe September, August 2009. And then a few of the songs, Reality was written in 2010. There's a few, there's kind of a large span there.
Sure, it's pretty good when you got those, when they hold up, when you still like them after that amount of time. It's worth recording
like
for sure.
it's been interesting to listen back, because some of my earlier stuff, like, I think this kind of tends to happen with a lot of artists, is like when you first start writing, it's like anything that's kind of been absorbed at any point in your life, no matter where it's from, seems to come out. And
Sure.
so your first like 10 compositions are like extremely different. They're completely like, and then as you kind of find more of what like your thing is, then it starts to be like a little bit less diverse. I actually kind of try to avoid that. Sometimes I feel like, hey, I'm kind of writing the same tune again, same vibe, same types of chords, same types of root movement, but I'm almost like, it's like I'm just kind of rearranging it.
Sure.
And I've been trying to
yeah.
like force myself out of that by continually trying to take in new information and, but.
Sure. Do you do that consciously, or do you find yourself just listening to all kinds of different music that finds its way into your writing?
I guess it's not that like conscious. It's conscious, but at the point when I finally start like writing a tune, and then I start realizing like small little idioms that I've written in like several of my arrangements. Like, there will be certain types of intervallic things that I notice I use all the time, almost like themes that seem to come back that I can't get out of my ear. But generally speaking, when I'm listening to music, I just find stuff that I like and I listen to that.
Sure.
You know, and
Yeah.
and I've actually come under fire for that a lot too, because I bet, like, you know, as compared to a lot of the really real jazz heads in New York City, there's like a lot of classic albums that I've never really checked out.
Ooh,
because I've just never really been into it, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, like I'll like maybe I'll arrive at it like years later, you know, something that everyone's been telling me to listen to, you know, and then I finally like, oh, this is really awesome. They're like, you're just now hearing that, and I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
dude, I wasn't into it before, you know.
Yeah. I think that's important though, because there have been instances in which I've heard, you know, a bunch of my friends are like, "This came out, you got to check this out," and then I listen to it. I'm just not in the mood to listen to it at the time when for whatever reason, and it could be like a day or it could be a week or a month or whatever. But I think sometimes if you force yourself to dig into something that you're not really, for whatever reason, open to at that time, you know, you can get bogged down on it, or it can be like you have like bad vibes attached to it or something like that. But sometimes you just have to
you
wait
know.
until that's the right time to check it out, you know?
Yeah.
Plus, nobody does the thing where it's like, there's nobody in the world started off like, well, I'm going to start at the beginning of jazz and work my way through every album or whatever. Like, I found, you know, early Louis Armstrong recordings like when I was in grad school or something like that. And I had heard that music before, but, you know, and then other things, more modern things I heard later or something, or whatever, you know, who knows?
Yeah, see, I mean, that's actually funny because, like, my experience has been very similar. My dad has always been, like, a big jazz fan, so I grew up hearing, like, Herbie records, and my dad was really into, like, kind of, like, the 70s Freddie Hubbard stuff. Like First Light, Red Clay. I don't know if that was 70s. Maybe it was late 60s. I'm not sure.
I think I think early 70s, but somewhere in there, 69, 70, something.
But, like, there's a bunch of those types of albums where they're kind of, like, funk influenced and, like, a little bit more electronic fusion. And that's, like, was kind of, like, my, like, early influence. I kind of had that stuff in my ear when I first started playing jazz. And then when I got to school here in New York, that's when I actually started listening to, like, bebop. I never listened to, like, bebop at all.
Ooh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, like, I was kind of more proficient at improvising, like, over, like, more modal and, like, third moving root movements, like Wayne Shorter tunes and stuff like that. And, like, playing on rhythm changes, for instance, was something that was not easy for me.
Sure.
And I had to go backwards, you know?
Yeah. So let's take a little time now to go back in time here and get into your origin story here. So what was it that brought you to the trombone in the first place, and how long have you been writing? What brought you into that world? Because you really got to commit to be a professional trombone player in the modern age.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was never someone that was, like, ever particularly interested in music. What ended up happening is my parents forced me to join band. When I entered into the 6th grade, we moved from the Seattle area in Washington to Vancouver, Washington, which is south. So it's really close to Portland, Oregon. I usually just tell people I'm from Portland, Oregon, because it's too confusing for people.
Sure.
But anyway, when I started in school there, I was starting middle school in 6th grade, and my mom had found a trombone for $65 at a garage sale of, like, one of our family friends was selling. He had all these. He's also a jazz fan too. Has also been someone that's been a supporter of my career and music since I've started, basically. But he collects all these instruments, and he was selling one. And my mom brought it home and said, "You have to play this."
That's pretty good.
Because at that point, I had already been forced to join band, and I started by on percussion. So I was playing. I had, like, one of those little drum pads and some sticks, and I was supposed to learn how to, like, do the paradiddles and the roll. And
Sure.
then my mom brought the trombone and canceled my drum career. And
May have been a wise choice for parents. I think that's a slick play as a parent.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. So, and then you just stuck with it from there. It's off to the races, man. You got the trombone.
I mean, like the band program in my area was really good. Like the public school band programs, it was, like, pretty intense. They had the marching bands. We did the parade bands. They had jazz band, and they also had pretty serious wind and concert bands also. So I was, like, pretty immersed in the music thing as soon as I started, and made a lot of good friends in the band program that I'm still friends with today. So I think that, like, social element is really part of the biggest reason I stuck with it for so long.
Sure.
And then at a certain point, I started to actually really find fulfillment doing it as well.
Do you find How has the last 6 months of lockdown affected the music for you because of the social element?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I miss playing with other musicians. Obviously, I mean that's like the
Sure.
biggest thing.
Yeah,
But like
right.
as far as like playing piano and like playing on my instrument, in some ways I've actually felt like more inspired at times than before. Sometimes you get bogged down on the scene, like just like going from gig to gig. That I feel like a lot of times we take time away from focusing on the things that we actually want to do and the things that actually made us want to be a musician in the first place. Like, I mean, I was doing like a lot of kind of like commercial top 40s types gigs. And I actually recently started playing in like the Hasidic Jewish community, like doing a lot of those types of jobs too. And I enjoy all of that, all of those different types of music. But
Sure.
sometimes, like when you're just hustling and just doing all this stuff, you know what I mean? You lose focus.
Oh, sure.
And so in some ways, yeah, like the quarantine has been nice because now anytime I play, I'm playing just for me. You know?
Yeah, sure. Interesting. Yeah. And I asked because it seems, in my beginning, it was the same in that you start to get into it because it's a social thing, and you have like, I mean, the music was always interesting to me, but you have like these groups or your friends are in it, and you're around people who are in it, and the whole scene, even coming to New York, like the scene is so wild that you just want to be a part of the whole thing. But
Yeah.
it definitely changes the character of it to be sort of, I've found being in my own head has been both what you're talking about, which is that you can dive into that which you've sort of put on the back burner for a little while and like really get into some music and practice and like write and get into some new stuff. But there's also a funny side of it, which is that like, man, you want to be out there hanging out with people and playing music and like interacting, especially in an improvisational art form,
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I usually get really like discouraged with as far as like the quarantine or just playing music with other people is actually writing. For some, like in the last few years, like, because I've done like a lot of big band writing and large ensemble writing, and generally when I'm writing, it's either it's for the septet or larger, and I get kind of down sometimes because it's like, why am I going to spend all this time writing this chart for it to sit on my computer?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So
I
like,
totally get it.
so I feel like I'm still kind of like constantly like thinking of new ideas and sketching them out like in my head. And I like play piano a lot of times with like these different drum apps and stuff and come up with cool ideas and stuff. But as far as actually getting to the computer and actually writing it out, somehow I have like this blockage from doing it unless I know that it's going to be performed.
Sure.
But like if I had a gig next week for like my big band, then I'd probably write like 3 charts this week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, the deadline is huge. Without the
Yeah.
deadline, it's hard. I've been trying. I'll get through most of a chart, writing it in. And I'll be like, nah, I'll figure out the rest of this later. And then it'll be like, the night before the next gig happens, that I'll finish all that, what have you. But yeah, the
Yeah.
deadline's a big deal. I could see how that would go. I'll tell you the other thing is, man, I'll tell you, the next time I have to play Sir Duke or September or one of these things, I'm gonna be psyched, man. For a long time, I was like, I don't know how many more times I can play Superstition, and now, like, when I get back on that train, dude, I'm gonna be all about the Stevie stuff. And not that there's anything wrong with Stevie Wonder, but for anybody out there who hasn't played 100,000 weddings, after a while, you start to wonder what you're doing, So you graduate high school. Where'd you go to school?
My high school is just public high school. It's called Evergreen High School. But you were talking
Sure.
about undergrad, right?
College, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're
Yeah,
a doctor, right?
Yeah,
Maybe the first person on the program is a full doctor of jazz.
whatever that means.
Yeah, sure. We're
I'm
gonna
a
find out,
doctor.
man.
I hold a doctorate degree in a subject that is a word that is offensive to many people for some reason.
Is that right? What? Wait, what is it? Jazz?
Yeah, I hope Nicholas Payton's not listening to this right now.
I hope he is.
I'm a doctor of jazz, Nicholas.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're gonna be okay, man. I don't think anybody's gonna be too. I'm open to the hate.
Yeah.
So where'd you start? Where's your undergrad?
Oh, I ended up going to the Juilliard School here in New York City.
Oh, okay, sure.
That's where I went. Yeah, and then for my master's degree, I studied what was called the studio music and jazz is like the performance degree at University of Miami, and I was in the studio jazz writing department,
Okay.
which was basically like a jazz composition degree, but also had like an element of studio. So I was like supposed to learn how to run like the soundboards and learn how to record and stuff. So
Oh,
that was
that's
actually,
awesome.
yeah, that was a really helpful degree. And then
For
the
sure.
DMA, I moved back into the performance side of things. I was still studying composition privately also as part of the degree, but technically the degree was studio music and jazz again.
Is that at Miami as well?
Yeah. So my master's and my doctorate were both at University of Miami.
Oh, cool. Man, that's something else. So is there this is a side note here, but is there a distinguishing thing then between jazz composition there and the studio, the composition and the studio stuff?
No, I mean it's just one degree. It's called studio/jazz writing.
Sure.
So like all of the writers were kind of like while simultaneously studying orchestration and arranging all that stuff, we were also the ones that our culminating project was for us to actually record, compose, and then record our own music and mix it, etc. So,
Man, that's huge. That's a hugely helpful approach. That's a little bit like I was thinking about at Berkeley, for example. I spent 2 semesters at Berkeley, and they distinguish between composition and pro music and some other things like that. You know, music production and engineering and what have you. But it's a big deal to have that all wrapped up into one because nowadays, if you can write, you know, you can get away with writing big band charts and just having people play them in real time. But without that, the technology or understanding how the recording side of it goes, you're at a huge disadvantage, I think.
yeah, it was actually really interesting because I think, like, generally speaking, people at University of Miami are way more tech savvy than like my colleagues at Juilliard. Like a lot of people, I think, on that end were just very, very jazz nerds. Like we're like learning tunes and we're learning how to play really well. But on as far as like the recording and technology and like the state of the art kind of things happening in the music industry, I feel like people weren't as in touch. And I think they ended up having to learn those things outside of school, whereas that degree for me allowed me to do it like right at the same time. And it was quite a bit of like a learning curve. Like I had no idea what anything was when I first got there because we never did it in undergrad. I was just playing tunes and learning how to play trombone. We never really talked about any of like the real life aspects of recording and making music.
Yeah, and that's how it was at New England Conservatory as well. And that you get like it's very centric, centered on the art itself, which is great in its own thing. But then it is very helpful, I think, to have the background in technology, especially nowadays, especially at this very moment in time when now you've got everybody you got to be able to piece together a video or put together a recording on the fly from your house or something,
Yeah, everyone had to learn now. Yeah.
So as soon as you graduated, you came back to New York.
Actually, I stayed out there for one more year after I finished, and that's actually that summer is when I recorded this album. So I graduated in May of 2017, and then I recorded in May of 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Miami.
Yeah, I actually recorded at the studio there at the university. It's
Oh,
called
cool.
The Weeks Recording Studio.
Oh, that's great. So you already had a familiarity with the environment.
Yeah.
You were in it, man. I'll tell you, the whole album sounds great. It sounds super clean, like a very modern sounding. Like you can hear everything. It sounds like you have a background in this, that you really knew what you were getting into going into it.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm pretty like particular about the way I want things to sound. Like obviously, like in the music itself and the way the musicians are performing, but also like I feel like I had like a certain idea of how I wanted the instruments to sound like in the mix and stuff. And like panning is like a big thing too. Making sure you can really hear sonically the place of each instrument. I didn't really, like obviously I had an engineer that like kind of understood what I wanted. So I wasn't really there turning knobs or doing anything.
Sure, of course. You don't want to.
Yeah.
If you got to lead the band, it's chaos. If you got to be thinking about how to capture the thing as well. But at least you knew. It seems like maybe it seems like you knew where you were going anyway. That you were like, this is the spot, and we're gonna make it sound such and such a way.
Yeah, and my engineer is a trombone player. Actually, his name is Chris Palowich. We played in the CJB at University of Miami together, and I think that actually gave him like a very unique touch on that end of things too. Because a lot of times, as you end up with engineers that even though they know all of the technical knobs and things to do, they don't actually know what like a trombone is supposed to sound like.
Sure.
They don't know what a saxophone's supposed to sound like. So like even though they're doing things that are supposed to make music sound better, they don't know what that instrument's supposed to sound like. So then like they're kind of there's like a disconnect in sometimes. So it was good to have a musician that performs that also
No doubt.
engineering, you know.
Yeah, and in particular, probably a brass player. I know that this isn't to be. I'm trying to catch myself before I insult all the engineers, but so I've heard a lot of recordings where people be like, "Trumpets, got it. Let's turn up the highs. We're gonna really kick this thing into gear," And you're like, "Well, that may not be exactly what we're going for here, But if you got people who know the deal, that's a big weight off your shoulders to be able to say like, all right, I trust the people that are running this operation.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. I don't know. I'm sure it's the same with any style of music. I mean, like there are punk rock records where everything was just a SM57 on a whatever and like live in a small room where Iggy Pop just went nuts or whatever, and that's part of the vibe. But jazz music maybe now in particular has such a wide range because if as sort of an improvising art form, there's a question as to how much of it you want to be in the room and how much of the room how live do you want it to sound, how like kind of let's say raw would you want it to sound like. There's some of my favorite recordings were recorded all in one room and it was chaos, you know what I mean, but it still sounds really good. And then there's other recordings that are recorded in a more modern way where everything's isolated and you have a lot more let's say control over what fixing errors or having solos come in or whatever. Did you think about how did you go about thinking about like, all right, this is how much we're going to have the capability of changing this on the fly and how much of it is going to be like a live room kind of vibe?
Yeah, that's something, to be honest, like, and if I ever record again, I think that I'm going to spend more time thinking exactly about that. Because what I really wanted to do is I wanted to just record the horn parts, like the whole band, but then leave out the solos so everyone could really make sure that they could play as well as they could. Mm-hmm. But that didn't end up happening. Like all of the other horn players played live just on their takes. Like, so we did like a couple different takes of each tune and we chose the best ones. And a few of my solos were live and then a few of them I overdubbed too. But I think like ultimately I can see how like a purist would say, oh, well, you should play everything live. You want it to have that blah, blah, blah. But to me, it's like a photo, this is like a photograph. You want to hear the music the best it can sound. And I'm not really necessarily worried about if it's exactly the way it would have sounded if it were live. I'm excited. I'm wanting it to sound the best it can sound. You know what I mean? Same thing like if you post a photo on Instagram, if you got like a professional photo, you spent money on it, you want them to make those finishing touches before you put it out. And this was kind of like a mix of like live and overdub, mostly just on me. All of the other instrumentalists played, like all of their solos were live. But I think in the future I would actually want it to be a little bit more controlled.
Okay.
And maybe I would do the rhythm section first and then do the horns next to try to get everything really, really clean,
Sure. I wonder is there an approach to doing that? It'd be interesting to talk to like people who produce jazz records on the regular to try to figure out, the different philosophies on this. But I wonder if there's a way to do that where you can still get the maximum amount of interaction. Like maybe as an example, recently I was recorded a big band demo, but I did it from everybody records their own part in their houses because it was back in March or something, or April or whatever it was, and there's no way to, even now we can't get a big band together practically, And it was tricky trying to figure out, okay, how do you maintain the concept of interaction and improvisation without having a live band in real time?
Well, like, I mean, if you did the rhythm section first and then say, like, it's like a quartet record, the rhythm section records, are you talking, like, one at a time or just rhythm section together?
Rhythm section together. Like, imagine if you just record, let's say, even just you're recording solos after the fact. Like, part of the sound is the interaction between the rhythm section and the soloist. So it's the tricky thing in that is to figure out, if you're playing a rock solo, you're jamming out. Like, everybody's just going to go nuts and you're going to play you're going to fall on the floor and play your wild solo or whatever. But like in this kind of a context, it's an interesting thing to try to navigate how to make the interactive element of it come through even when you're interacting with somebody who's playing after you, rather than at the same time.
Yeah, well, plenty of people don't listen even when it's happening at the same time anyway. So
That is certainly
but,
true.
But like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like if I was recording to like a Jamie Aebersold track or something like that, especially if you do a few different takes, you start to get a feel for how they played, and you can interact with them, even if they're not responding back. You know what I mean? So you can like, I guess it's a little bit more one-sided. You have to kind of fit into what they're doing, as opposed to both people trying to fit in at the same time.
Sure.
But I think it can still sound. I don't know. I mean, like to me, that type of thing is like that's like the last like 3% of a record. I don't know that like anyone would really hear, especially like a large ensemble record. I don't think that anyone would hear a big band record and be like, that sounds really good, but did you notice how the trumpet player played this and no one reacted to it?
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like for instance, like hopefully I won't get in trouble for this. He probably doesn't care.
We're gonna get in trouble, baby. We're going in.
We're gonna get canceled, man.
We've already got Nick Payton on the phone, dude.
Well, like Brian Lynch's new record that I think I think he won the Grammy for it. The Latin American Songbook, is that what it was called? I can't remember exactly. Something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember exactly what it is. I feel bad to not quote it right. But I know that they did like a lot of tracking on that record. So they did like the rhythm section, and then they did like the trombones, saxes, trumpets, and then like maybe like auxiliary percussion instruments later, voices later, strings later. I don't know if there's strings, but like I'm just saying, like I know that happened, and also with I also recorded on one of John DeVerse's records when I was down at UM. That was also Grammy nominated. And that one was like just like that. I actually went in by myself one time and recorded like all of the trombone parts by myself.
Oh wow.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Not all of them, but like all of the different tunes.
Okay, gotcha.
So like, you know what I mean? Like,
who knows?
Like at a certain point, I mean, like, and even like you think about like other styles of music, like rock music or classical music, even like. If you play the notes correctly, then the energy is there from the actual composition. It doesn't necessarily have to be like this super artsy, hippie, organic, natural.
Sure. Yeah. I suppose it depends on it's all just the color of what you're going for in some respect. Like, if I listen to an old, like, I don't know if I can come up with a good example on the fly, but like, if you're listening to an old Thad Jones, Mel Lewis record, like some of those live performances really, you wouldn't necessarily notice if it wasn't there, but that like the live nature of it, the interaction and the improvisational quality of it, or even like the way that, if you ever see videos, like the way that Thad would conduct the band a lot of the time had such like an atmosphere to it. But that's a very different thing than if you're going for, like maybe one of the things that I'm trying to avoid is that tendency, especially in jazz world. I think we love to be elitists for some reason, but of that thing that's like, this is the right way to do it, and if you're off the thing, you're the wrong. It's the wrong. That's But at the end of the day, it really depends on what color you're going for or what you're aiming at.
Well, like that's actually, it's funny because I think that I want my music to sound as close to like exactly what I was intending as possible. So like if people miss notes, I would prefer them not to do that.
Right. Sure.
You know what I mean? Whereas like I feel like some people will like literally like defend that like Miles' solo on such and such record actually sounds better because he missed the note. But like that to me is kind of like doesn't make sense, because it's like if you respect Miles Davis's artistry, then actually what he intended to play actually would have been better, because he was trying to play something, he just couldn't do it. So you actually think what he messed up was better than what he intended? So you're actually kind of insulting his artistry in that way.
That's an interesting point, actually. I think that's an interesting point, and it may speak to your approach and your style in general. But well, what I'll say is I agree in, let me think, like I would be one of those people who would defend Miles's mistakes or the sound of the thing, or I really love Don Cherry. And the sound of Don...
Oh, man.
This is going to be ripe with controversy, man.
I'm out of here.
I know. All right. I appreciate the the descent, man. But I'll tell you. But what I like about Don Cherry is that you can hear him going for it. Like it's something like you don't always know that he knew what was going to happen before it happened, but he's going for it, and it comes out something that even you wouldn't expect because it's something that we don't know if he exactly would have expected. Maybe he would. I'm not saying, either way, but like there's a sense with him and a lot of other certainly free musicians where it's like, all right, you're really going for it, and whether you stick the landing is sort of secondary. However, in my own recordings, I've never been disappointed that I fixed a mistake. There have been times in the studio where I'm like, well, it's kind of a character thing. Do I keep this fracked note or whatever? Do I keep this other thing? And then for the rest of my life, anytime I listen to the thing, I've never been like, man, I should have kept that mistake in there.
Yeah.
So I see it from both ends. But again, it depends on the style. Like if you're listening to a Maria Schneider record and somebody just like completely, cracks a note, like just or misses a thing or whatever, there's like a section doesn't come in right, it's not going to fly. But if you're listening to, I don't know, if you're listening to, I don't know, like the Art Ensemble of Chicago, I don't even know how you'd know. Like, well, that didn't sound like it was perfectly executed. It just depends on the style.
Well, I guess and I'm gonna sound offensive when I say it.
Great, let's
it's
just
just
do
gonna.
it.
There's no way to say it. Well, I think that music where there's been less planning and less organization is capable of sounding like there was less planning and less organization when it's performed, and it's more acceptable in those styles. So like a free jazz type of ensemble, if something goes wrong, no one thinks something went wrong because they didn't know what was going to happen, and it never sounded like they knew what was supposed to happen. You know what
Sure.
I mean? And same thing with like if you're like listening to like a band playing tunes and they're just calling tunes, they didn't have any arrangements, they didn't really put in any thought into the actual product before they did it, then I think it's more acceptable when we hear moments of thoughtlessness. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I also kind of like, in some ways, I'm kind of against that because I think that that's actually kind of one of the biggest problems in the jazz industry is that we're constantly serving up stuff that we didn't even think to put together. We're like presenting something that we've never actually put any thought into, and then we wonder why people don't want to come hear it. When people go listen to music, they want to hear, they want to see a finished product, and they want to see something that's actually put together and that you've put time and effort into. It's like you don't want to go, maybe sometimes, I'm like a big foodie, maybe if there was like a really famous chef and I knew that he's like just like cooks random stuff every night and you could go to his restaurant and just eat whatever he's cooking, I would do that sometimes, but I still think the restaurants that are the most important, that are the most, that sell the most, that people really love the most, are the ones where they go there and they know what they're expecting and they get exactly the exact product that the chef, they put together the menu, they put together the decor, they really thought of everything, and then people go there and they get the experience that they know that they're going to get. Mm-hmm. And I think that just doesn't happen very often in jazz, and when it doesn't, we excuse it as saying it's artistic.
Sure. Interesting. I wonder how the it's an interesting analogy with the food because I'm trying to piece it together and I'm wondering if it works the same way improvisationally. But I wonder if there's another because you wouldn't want somebody to just be like if you go to somebody's house and they're like, this is what I had in my fridge. Like I didn't really think about it in advance, but here's what we have to work with. That may be different than going to a 5-star restaurant and hoping that they're gonna, have it together.
But that's exactly what we're doing with like a lot of tunes. Like I mean not tunes, but with gigs. Like people you go, maybe you go to the Django or something like that, and they're playing on, or in the Roxy. They always have like kind of quartets and small groups playing. Mm-hmm. Those bands actually usually sound pretty polished, actually. But, you know what I mean? Like, I lost my train of thought.
But you want it to be, your vibe is you want it to feel pre-play. You want to know that this is very specifically what was going into this in advance.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. I just want it to be executed well. You don't have to know what's going on, but you have to sell it. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're too comfortable knowing that we sounded bad and knowing that we're not giving people our best. And you'll even hear people on gigs being like, well, this gig doesn't matter. It's only $50. You'll even hear people excusing their behavior, sounding bad, and they know they sound bad, and saying that it's fine because because I'm just great instrumentalist. I have really great technique and great sound in my instrument. So
Sure.
even though I performed poorly, it's still great because look at how great I am.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with you on that. I mean, there's no sense in doing in my mind, any gig if you're not going to give it, if you're not going to give it your all. Sometimes some things turn out better than others, but if we're going to commit ourselves to this insane lifestyle, you might as well really commit to the art, at least make the best that you can. I will say, I guess you're not much of a free jazz guy.
Nah. No.
That's fine, man. That's what it's all about.
I'm always willing to re-listen to stuff, though, because just like I was saying to you before, it's like there's certain things that people have been telling me to check out for years, and then I go back and listen to them later, and then I love it. So
maybe
after,
your time.
After this, send me some stuff. I'm always willing to re-listen.
I certainly will. That's what comes to mind is I know growing up in Boston, free music is a big part of the scene. It's sort of intertwined with everything else. It's not like a separate thing. I don't know if that comes from like the tradition of Jackie Byard and George Russell and like Sam Rivers and people being there who had this sort of inside-outside approach, Makonda, Ken McIntyre, people like that. But I wonder if some of the best shows I've seen in my experience have been in small rooms where people are completely improvising. But to me, it's almost like listening to two different things. Like, what's a good example? Like if I go to a folk, no, I don't know if this is going to be, okay. If I go to see a folk singer or something like that, right? And I want them, and they wrote these like songs, these polished songs with, and it's got a vibe to it. I want that vibe out of that. I don't want it to be like complete random, well, I forgot the lyrics and like, like I'm going to try something totally, maybe there's something to it that's like, all right, this should be polished or this should be the way that it was intended in some, or the way that I expect it. But there's a lot of music that even just for like the one moment where everything comes together and it's like these magical improvisational experiences, that to me is worth even a part of the performance being people trying to find what it is that they're going for. Like there's an energy to it in the same way there would be in like a punk rock performance or, I don't know, maybe some more like improvisational. Like sometimes it can go off the rails, but to me, maybe I like the danger a little bit, Maybe the danger is worth the final result.
I understand what you're saying. I think that we're both trying to pursue some type of definition for something that we haven't quite figured out. Because I think there's probably a lot more places where we agree. Like for instance, like I'm thinking about like a classical music performance, like say like the Rite of Spring or something that's pretty difficult, like technically for like all the instruments and musicians involved. Every time that piece is performed, it's going to be performed a little bit different, and it's going to be very difficult every time. And so there's always that danger is always there, but there's a preparedness that no matter what happens, it's going to be like at a high like level. It's going to be like in the 95th percentile as far as accuracy, and to me, that shows like a certain level to be able to like to do that, even when you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe you're performing the same piece, but now you have a new conductor and you don't know how fast it's going to go at certain places or how he's going to do certain things, or maybe they drop their score and like then the orchestra has to keep playing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
For some reason, those types of situations, when in the classical music world, are still handled with like a certain level of like grace, and
Sure.
there's still a high level of proficiency. But I've literally heard like jazz bands where it just sounds like just bad, and like my band
Sure.
is one of them. You know what I mean? It's like people you send the music out ahead of time. People don't check out the charts. You're on stage at the gig. Gig doesn't pay anything, but I don't care about that. Hopefully no one else does.
Sure.
Obviously they do.
Right.
And we just like train wreck,
Right. Yeah.
And then you'll have people excusing those types of things happening. I don't know.
Right. Well, that I certainly agree. I think that I think you're, I don't want to say morally obligated, but whatever, we're already getting in trouble. So I would say you are morally obligated to give your all to whatever it is that you're doing. If you're going to be an artist and you're going to show up and play and you've dedicated your life to this, it's another issue if you said, I got into this because I wanted to make money. First of all, not a good play. If anybody's listening to this and is like coming up and is thinking about getting into jazz to make money, you may need to try some other thing, or whatever, or music in general. But if you're like, all right, I want to play drums in like a club date band or whatever, play weddings and stuff, and I just want to get paid, that's a different vibe. But even then, anything that you agree to do, I think that you're obligated to give it your all and to play and really mean it, even if it's not the most high paying, whatever the pay might be. Like, you've committed to this as your life. That's my feeling on it. Whether or not that was accepted by, the masses is another issue.
Yeah, because like, I mean, there's a certain like percentage of things that I feel like is acceptable. Like, people not knowing, like, obviously I don't want people to know what, like, neither one of us is arguing for, like, we should have like our solos scripted or anything like that,
Yeah.
So there's always an element of chance, and there's always that element of excitement, not knowing what's going to happen and exactly how it's going to happen, etc. But within that, I want the things that are supposed to happen the way they're supposed to happen.
Sure.
And actually, in a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what makes my music difficult, is because I think that it feels natural enough that people want to just kind of sit back and relax. But then there's always some little twist and turn in the way I write, where if you're not paying attention, it's going to get you.
Sure.
Sometimes there's like a 7-bar phrase, a 9-bar phrase, or the melody would be very repetitive, but then like the next time it comes around, it's like a slight like embellishment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I feel like there's kind of, a lot of times there's kind of two different schools of musicians. There's the musicians that just want to play and they don't want to have to think about like, what is it, left brain creativity, or is it right brain creativity? And then the other side is the whatever. I think they've actually disproven that stuff. It's like on both sides anyway.
It's probably, yeah.
But it's like, there's the kind of creative guys that don't want to think about reading, and they don't want to think about ensemble playing. They just want to play the way they play. And then there's the other guys that are really thinking about that stuff. And I feel like to be really great on my music, you have to do both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to know when to do them, when to turn that side of your brain off, and when not to.
Yeah, because you don't want anybody to wing it. And if you're sitting down to write the music and you're saying to yourself, this is going to be a slight variation on this next part, you want that to come out. It's not just do whatever.
Exactly.
Like you've put the time into this, and there is a lot to be said for respecting the composer's efforts, the efforts that you put into making things work the way that you want them to work. Like, you don't just want to wing it.
Yeah.
I will say that what you're saying about the solos reminds me of when I was at NEC. I studied with Jerry Bergonzi, and he told us a story about going to see Horace Silver's band in Boston at one point, and it was Junior Cook and Blue Mitchell, and he went to go see him the first night, and he was like, "That was amazing. I'm gonna go back and check him out the second night." And he was like, "Man, these solos sound similar to what I heard last night." And he went to talk to Junior Cook, and he said, "Man, this might sound weird, but it sounds like you guys were playing the same solos as last night," which is actually kind of amazing. I think back to that Jerry was able to pick the stuff, remember. I don't know if I'd remember it, but Junior Cook said, "Yeah, well, we're going into the studio soon, so Horace wants us to get the solos together."
See, that's exactly what I was talking about. So, like, when we were talking about earlier about getting the recording really clean, you know what I mean? So, like, it can be more scripted in that, like that organic thing where it's going to be different every time. I think is actually a failing point sometimes on jazz records, where like it would have been better if they actually knew exactly the way they were going to do it when they go into the studio. Because I think you can get away with it more in a live performance. You can kind of allow those kind of crazy moments to happen, and you can get away with them more. But like in a recording, it's like it's a snapshot. It's like a picture, so it's going to be like that the whole time.
Yeah,
it's going to be like that every time.
For sure. That also reminds me of Lee Morgan's solo on Moanin', where you can hear the alternate take of that, and even though it changes a little bit as he goes, there's still a concept that he was going for. So he could at least go for something and then embellish as he went.
Yeah, I mean, J.J. Johnson is also like notorious for doing that too. Like all of his alternate takes, feel like he plays very similar solos and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But that's got to be a spectrum. I mean, again, it's just it's like there are some people who are gonna say, all right, well, everything I do is going to be completely different, and I'm not sticking to its own one thing. And other people are going to say this has to turn out the way that I want it to turn out.
Yeah.
But you're probably right. I mean, in terms of just an audience base, I'm sure there's a lot about jazz that people in general, the public, who's going to be maybe more drawn to I don't know, Nicki Minaj than Maria Schneider or something like that, may not get into, but also it depends on the listener, I suppose,
Yeah.
Do you think about live performance as being like, I don't know if this is something that you'd consciously think of, but if you go into a live performance, is there any sense for like, all right, there's going to be a little bit more chance in this, or do you think of them as the same thing? I know you're thinking about the recording as being sort of a reflection of the live performance, but do you think of live performance any differently? Like, do you stretch out more, or do you like allow
Yeah,
for...
I like people being able to stretch more on the live shows. In fact, it's funny because like a lot of times I'll go back and listen to recordings if I've ever recorded stuff on live shows, and like my tunes will be like 15 or 20 minutes long, and I'm like, wow, that tune is only like 6 minutes on the record,
Sure.
and I like that because in a lot of ways, like sometimes like those types of things that can happen on the live gigs can sometimes influence like maybe new sections of the tune that I add on to it later. I'm like, oh, we got into this kind of interesting groove during the piano solo, but maybe that would be cool to do that every time. Maybe that's worth keeping,
Sure.
I think other styles of music. I mean, I played in a Haitian band in Miami, and a lot of times the way these guys would like kind of come up with new sections in the music is we would do like a rehearsal, and the drummer would just like sing to the horns. He'd be like, ba ba da da ba da da ba da. You know what I mean? And then we would figure it out, and then we would like rehearse like these like little sections. And then the next time we would play that tune, he would kind of look at us, and then we would like insert this like new section, this whole new like development into the tune that wasn't there before. And over the course of years of these guys having all of these like weird, like, and the percussionists would have their own little things, and the guitars would have their own little things, and everyone had these like little extra things that were added like in post and built over years. Now you go to one of these gigs and you're like, how the hell did these guys know what to do? Like, how did they know that? Like the drummer will start playing some rhythm, and then everyone else will jump in on it, and it'll be like a super complex rhythm. They'll all jump in on it and know exactly when to stop, and then they'll go back into the groove, and it's like, what?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's a real value too in having a band that can rehearse all the time.
Exactly.
And you can work out the details. That's something that, especially in New York, it is difficult to wrangle the same people at the same time and work out a regular gig enough that you can it would be very difficult. You could write stuff out and have people learn the material, but it's a different thing to have that where you're, all right, we're doing a regular rehearsal and we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because I've played with a lot of bands like that, and there's definitely an energy to like, oh yeah, we all know this stuff up and down because we played it 15,000 times.
Exactly.
That may actually be a feature of, like, when you think about the way that the Miles band played in the 60s, like, that's a very improvisational approach, but they also played a million gigs together. Or like the Duke Ellington band, too. Like, they played like 364 days a year or something like that. Like, they could do anything. They knew what was going to happen at any given time.
Yeah, so that's like the irony of like these bands that we kind of perceive as being more organic sounding, is that they're actually just as prepared as rehearsed bands. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Maybe they didn't actually have like a strict conversation about exactly what was going to happen, but they came to a conclusion by playing several times,
Yeah, sure.
So like within like the perceived chaos, there's actually like a structure that is actually like keeping them all together, and maybe that's why it has such a vibe. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And that, going back to Boston and my pitch for free music, there's a band in Boston. Do you know? There's a band called The Fringe. It was George Garzone, John Lockwood, and Bob Gulati. And they played every night for many years. I don't know if they're still doing it at the same level. Unfortunately, Bob Gulati passed away a couple months ago. But they had played together for, I don't know, 30 years or something like that, maybe more, maybe 40 years or something like that. And they would play every Monday night in Cambridge, and it was totally free. But they knew each other's playing so well that there were things that I saw them do that was like magic. Like, you'd be like, how is it possible that on the they just would turn on a dime or something like that and be in a completely different place, or they'd be playing tunes, then all of a sudden be in a different place. But it was clear that they all knew each other's playing so well. Yeah. I worry sometimes that there's just in sort of the modern approach. By modern, I mean like right now. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? And jazz could blow up next year, and all of a sudden we've all got gigs and we got we can play together in the same groups all the time. But I don't worry about it. But I always feel like that something's missing if we can't have those regular either touring bands, or you can't do do 2 weeks at the 5 spot before you're recording, or there isn't the same sense because maybe the economics isn't there in the same way that it used to be, to have that opportunity to play the same music over and over again. I don't know if there's a remedy to that, but I always kind of think it's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, yeah, it's kind of like this like downward spiral because I think part of the reason that there isn't as much opportunity is because we're not presenting finished products that people want to hear, and because we're not presenting finished products that people want to hear, we don't have as much opportunity to put together those finished products.
Sure.
So like the only way to compensate for it is for people to just be like, well, I don't care that I'm not getting paid. Let's just go rehearse every week. So when we do play, it's really great and people talk about it. And then hopefully through our effort, something will come of it. Mm-hmm. But I don't really sense that like a lot of times in the scene that people are willing to make sacrifices. People only want to jump into bands that are already established. It seems like no one's really like willing to put in like the blood, sweat, and tears to make something as a cohesive. It's like, oh, I don't really want to play with that guy's band, even if it's good, because they don't have enough good gigs yet.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And actually for that, I'm really grateful because like a lot of the guys I've been playing with recently are always super down to play, even though like the majority of the stuff we're doing is not really paying anything. So that's been like really awesome.
Sure.
I would still like to rehearse more, but like, you have to.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's a personal, that's a personality thing, but I always want to surround myself with those people who are down to play, who are there to do it because they want to do it. And
exactly.
I hear a lot, there's a lot of people maybe in a little bit more of the commercial side of things who are like, I'm not getting out of bed for less than this amount of money. Yeah. And I'm a totally, what's the best way to put it? Like, I'm totally laissez-faire on all that. Like if your vibe is like, I'm in it for the money, that's great, man. But that's not my style. Like, that's its own thing. I'm not going to call those people. And they're not going to call me either. You know what I mean? And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm on your team on that for sure. Like, it is a big... it's important that people want to put the time in. The one tricky thing is, I don't know if I'm sure that it's different. I had the opportunity to go down to Miami a couple times. I go down once a year to play a festival on the Virginia Keys. And I love the scene there. I thought it was awesome. Especially all the, like... how vibrant the whole music scene is and the different, like, I don't know, like all the different styles of music that you have going on down there. But I'm sure the vibe is very different. In many towns, you could actually have the opportunity to do that because there isn't that much going on. But in New York, so many people are here to do precisely what it is that they came to do. Like, they want to play their music. So your music may be a detraction from them playing their music. Or your music might be an opportunity for them to meet other people so that they can do the thing that is what they want to do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like, unfortunately, it's like this kind of like Devo-isms that have infiltrated the jazz world, where I feel like a lot of times it used to be more of a collective effort. And so we'd all put our brains together and create something together. And obviously, my record has my name on the front of it, so I wasn't really fighting against that spirit very much myself. But yeah, it seems like in the pop world, it's everything centered around the lead singer, and you get all these different people working to make that one person sound good. As opposed to, I feel like in the jazz world, like I think what's made our music great is that collective thing, like whatever each individual brings, like into that. But now that people are kind of seeing themselves more as like pop artists and like separate islands, even the whole Instagram thing. How many followers do you have? You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like,
right.
It's like
Sure,
everyone's trying to promote their own brand instead of trying to really create the best music.
Sure. And in a lot of instances, I think if you are playing a music that requires a collective approach, in that, like, everybody's bringing their own personality to the table, you have to be yourself. There's always a balance there. You have to be yourself, and you have to play the way that you play, but you have to also accommodate the music as it is, whatever's happening. You know, you have to be conscious of the vibe that's happening and try to bring what you can to it and try to think about it as being your contribution to the greater whole in that particular instance.
Yeah.
But it's a tough balance. I don't know if we'll ever solve it. I think part of the answer may be that the question is the answer. Part of it is trying to find that balance, All right, let's dive back into this record for a minute here. There's a couple things I wanted to try to dive into.
Yeah, we went way off there.
That's great, man. We're trying to get canceled, bro. We're going for it. We'll have to get more controversial than that. Anyway, all right. So you got a bunch of tunes on there that are instrumental. The beginning is the first track rather. Double Visions. Is that a quintet? Is it? How many horns are on that?
It's septet. Yeah, it's
okay,
4
septet.
horns.
That's
Yeah.
the whole thing. And then piano, bass, and drums. And then
Yep.
at times you got vibes. You've got a little pandero in there, maybe some percussion stuff.
Yep.
What else you got? Electric bass. You got electric guitar in there at some point. Acoustic guitar. Maybe the most radical thing you've got in there is acoustic guitar, which rarely rears its head in a jazz record.
Yeah.
And then vocals. Who's the vocalist?
Lauren Desberg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are beautiful songs, man. Is that do you write the lyrics or do you write the melodies, or how did those come about?
Yeah, I mean, to be 100% real, like, I mean, all of the tunes, I write the melody first, and then I go back and try to find lyrics. Actually, I think I Tried So Hard.
Mm-hmm.
I may have actually written that like kind of simultaneously, like lyrics and melody at the same time. Because like that tune actually was a tune that I made on Logic. I was messing around with like, you know, like all the different sounds and stuff in there, and I came up with that little, like that little montuno or ostinato thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just started kind of like singing over the top of it. And I just like kind of came up with both of those things like at the same time.
Sure.
But generally speaking, when I'm writing lyrics, I'm doing it after the melody, and I get the vibe from the music and the chords, and then try to think about what type of lyric would actually fit with the way the music sounds.
Sure. So you're coming up with the sound of the music first, and then trying to find how to fit, let's say, what the story is after the fact, or did you go in? Especially like I tried so hard. Seems like it's got a story to it in particular, but was that something that you had in mind that you were trying to convey, or was that you wrote some sounds came to you and then you were like, what is the story behind these sounds?
Exactly. I mean, you know, it's funny. I mean, without us getting off on like another crazy tangent.
We're going in, man. I'm telling you.
I actually think in a lot of ways like lyrics inhibit the actual emotion of music.
Amazing.
Because I think that there's certain things that can't be expressed through especially just one language. We're just like in English, there's like so many expressions that exist in other languages that we don't even really process in our heads as native English speakers. But in addition to that, like sound and like the spectrum of like hertz and like low to high and all of these different timbres with different resonances above. And I mean, like, there's all of these different types of like emotional reactions that can happen outside of language, and especially outside of our own language. So sometimes I almost feel like putting lyrics on songs, and we've all heard it too before. If you've ever done, like, did you ever do like the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program?
No.
Well, like sometimes what happens in that, because it's Betty Carter's program, they put a vocalist in every ensemble. But like you have all these instrumentalists that are bringing tunes, and what ends up happening, the easiest way for the vocalist to find a place in those tunes is to write lyrics to the tunes.
Sure.
And so you end up hearing these tunes with lyrics, and it's like that tune sounds so much more mundane now with the lyrics. It doesn't work.
Sure.
It sounded it had a much deeper emotional content when we weren't actually having to focus on what they were telling us the emotional content was. Everyone had like a separate experience that was probably deeper than when you tell everybody what their experience is supposed to be.
Sure.
And that's essentially what lyrics are. It's like, this is what you're supposed to be thinking about when you're listening to the song.
I think that is a great travesty when people will go and take, footprints or something like that, some tune that's already been established, and then like retroactively put lyrics over it. I think that sometimes you get the same thing where you go, oh man, that tune was cool until it forced me to think in that one particular vein. I totally feel where you're coming from in there. Although there are certain things like, I don't know, are you like a Bob Dylan guy? Do you like folk music, or even?
I've never really checked it out, but I do believe this is one of the things that's interesting about some of like that folk country Appalachian stuff is I actually feel like the lyrics and the singing in those actually fits the music more than a lot of times when I hear it in jazz.
Okay.
You know?
Sure. Maybe the precedent or the dominant force in that is the lyrics, and then the music becomes like a secondary, like a support, as opposed to the other way around, something like that.
Yeah.
Or like I don't know, like hip hop or something like that. I don't know. That's its own. Like the lyrics become their or the rhythm of the lyrics become its own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So you went through and you said in all these songs, how many other tunes have lyrics to them? There's the two parts to "Tried So Hard." Is there anything else on there? Because you have the voice in some instances serves as not only an instrument, but at times it like a background. Like you use it as like a part of the ensemble or whatever, which is a cool effect without it being tied to lyrics.
Yeah, the Discord had lyrics also. That was
Okay.
the other one.
Yeah.
And then some of the other ones just had it as just like texture.
So was there a particular story you were trying to tell, or did you come up with it as you went along?
Which tune?
Let's say I Tried So Hard. Either one of them.
Well, that one was like, I mean, basically, I feel like the sound of that tune kind of inspired the lyrics. I feel like it sounds dark, it sounds emotional, it sounds like contemplative, like someone that's kind of like thinking about something that's like emotionally distressing, but they can't quite figure out exactly what that is. So I mean, like the lyrics were basically talking about like being frustrated with the relationship and leaving. And like breaking up, and also like dealing with the frustration of like really trying to make something work, but feeling like the other person wasn't putting in the same amount of effort. You know? So I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I can't really speak to it. I just kind of write music, man.
Yeah, sure. Okay. But everybody's got their own, like, all right, like you're not sitting around writing poetry and then waiting for that to turn into music. Like it's something that occurred to you. But you have to make a big leap, man. It's not like you write melodies and then all of a sudden you can write lyrics. Like lyrics are hard and lyrics can ruin a tune. Like you're saying, for sure, I've heard a lot of songs that are like, this would be good, but the lyrics are terrible and it ruins the thing. Like, you got to make a leap to get into that.
Exactly. And it's funny because I actually like listening back over time, like the lyrics of Discord are pretty like, I'm not thrilled. I don't think they're like super great. It's funny. I think like a lot of instrumentalists, when they write lyrics, we tend to be like overly emotive in the way we write. We don't know how to be subtle yet. And I think that's something that comes with the maturity of being a better writer. I think the lyrics in I Tried So Hard are a little better, and they're a little bit speaking to a broader picture instead of being so specific about you broke my heart and I felt so bad when you blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like those are the types of lyrics that I feel like really can take you out of like the emotional aspects of a composition.
Sure.
It's the stuff that's like a little bit more broad that speaks to like an experience that can still be individual for everybody, but they understand what that thing is. I think those things can like hit harder instead of talking about a very specific thing that happened.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think there's a lot to in instrumental music. I feel like sometimes you meet the audience halfway, where you say like, here's what we got, but then the audience can put their own life experience into it in whatever way. Sometimes you feel like, all right, this is what the music is saying, but who cares if that's what the person who wrote it was necessarily intending? It's that you meet somewhere in the middle. And if there's a way to write lyrics where, not to say that it's abstract, but that you leave space for every individual to put themselves into it, that gives you a lot more maybe to work with or something.
Exactly,
or maybe it'll reach more people.
And that's the difference between like good lyrics and Cardi B's new hit single.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't that number one? That's number one, bro. We got it. This is like, oh,
but you know what I mean? Like that's like the epitome of leaving nothing to the imagination.
Correct.
Like literally,
in many respects.
Like literally just trying, like, well, whatever.
Yeah.
She's making millions of dollars.
She's got her own thing going on, but I don't know. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like I mean, like people listen to that song and they have an emotional reaction, but it's not like a deep emotional reaction. It's like playing to like our very guttural animalistic tendencies, which I think are not the ones that I personally tried to get people to listen to. I want like a transformative and like a transcendent experience when I listen to music. I want something that takes me out of myself, and makes me feel something like profound. And A lot of times that's probably part of the reason I don't like lyrics, because lyrics literally tell me that this is this mundane, like, of the world topic that we're talking about. I'm talking about my truck and the big tires and driving down the old country roads and meeting up with my old lady at the bar to have a beer and have a conversation. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
So it's like, I mean, how deep can you really get when you're talking about...
just a specific narrative in that regard.
And it's also specific to culture, too. So, like, now it's no longer a timeless piece of music, because if someone a few hundred years ago heard that, they're like, what is a truck? What is this restaurant that you went to? I don't know what that is. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas, like, the more timeless pieces of music are things that, like, really speak to something that's integral to all of, like, humanity. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
it's timeless.
Yeah. And I think there are probably ways to tell stories and still leave it open-ended. There's certainly an element to listening to music. Like, I want to be able to go revisit an album I've heard 15 times or 1,000 times or any number of times and still get something new out of it, because I'm bringing something else in my own experience to the table. But I think about that with a lot of old Motown lyrics, where even though it might be telling a specific story, it still is a little open-ended enough. In my mind, just for whatever reason, there was an era in the 60s where these guys were writing these Motown tunes, and it still seems timeless. Like, Heard It Through the Grapevine or whatever, or any of this stuff, like, somehow... Like, if you wrote a tune now that was talking about, like, you know, texting somebody, or, like, your, you know, how your Instagram followers are doing or something like that, you'd be like, what is, you know, in a couple of years, you'd be like, what even is this? Exactly. But there are certain things that can maybe touch on the human condition in a timeless way and still get lyrics across. But it's an interesting question as to how much that anchors somebody to the story itself and lets people, you know, interpret it on their own terms.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you, Discord is one of my favorite tunes on the record. And one of the reasons for that is that you seem in that one to really lay into the groove. And there's a thing in, speaking of, like, maybe the difference between, or an element of jazz that people really liked that we've dispensed with almost completely, is that idea that you can listen to old Art Blakey records, or you can listen to, you can listen to Philly Joe Jones just cook. Just swing and just play. And it doesn't have to be everybody playing everything they can all the time. It's just, we're going to take 5 minutes of playing a track, or a lot of Oscar Peterson stuff. All right, this is the groove. We're just going to swing. It's going to be, you know, cross stick on 4, and we're just going to swing and have a good time till the end. And that seems lost, where everybody's like, now sometimes, you know, again, it just depends on the context, but it seems like all jazz now is like, let me interject every possible thing that I've learned forever. And that was a tune that, as I was listening to, I was like, this is just grooving, man. We're just cooking. This is fun, you know?
That's great. I'm glad you felt that, because, like, that's another thing this Haitian band I used to play with is called Class with a K. That's one of the things, like, I've really, like, started thinking about a lot when I was playing with that band, because you have, like, these little interludes and these moments of interest, but, like, for, like, a lot of times after we get through, like, the lyric of the song, these guys would just literally just play the groove for like 10 minutes and everyone would dance, and it would feel fucking amazing, man.
Yeah.
That shit was, like, amazing. And like, I miss that about jazz sometimes, just the groove. And I think it kind of goes back to that diva syndrome thing, where everyone's trying to create their own brand all the time instead of trying to create the best music. Because it's like if I'm just playing this repetitive figure on the piano, no one's going to notice me. I have to do something. You know what I mean? It's like It's like ADD music. It's like, oh, did you hear what the piano player just did? Oh man, but the drummer just did that. And the bass player goes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like everyone's, like, always trying to create this thing instead of just, like, laying into that, you know, like the beauty of what they're making together, of how all those things fit together, the puzzle pieces.
Sure.
You know?
Yep. It's funny, the ADD thing, man, because it's like the worst. In that respect, it's the worst of both worlds, because it's like, oh yeah, something's going to happen in every minute, but it's going to go on for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So, it's like, all right, we got people who are interested in different things happening all the time and can also sit in one place, you know, and check out one tune for a long time.
Well, it's really impressive, you know. It's like I hear like a lot of bands that are really impressive, but, like, again, like, my personal, you know, like, use for music is, like, I want to be, like, transported. And I do think that like something about, like, groove and keeping things, like, a little bit more simplistic, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, there's something there for that.
Yep. That's always something I've really enjoyed about African music and reggae music, and a lot of I would say, you know, music that was directly descended from from the African approach is that a lot of the time it's just going to be, it's almost like a hypnotic, we're in this world for as long as we're going to be there. We're just going to, this is your part. That's the same thing actually with like, I don't know, cumbia music and various things like that. Like a lot of it is like, here's your part. You are going to play this. Like you're playing the conga. This is your one thing that you do until the end of the song. But there's something about that everybody committing to the same thing is really kind of remarkable.
Yep.
But in my mind, the blend of all the things, whatever you can take from all those worlds is something else. You know, if you can piece everything together. Like there's nothing wrong with James Brown being able to play that groove for 20 minutes and then also, Maceo Parker being able to take a wild solo or something like that.
Yeah.
Whoever, So my favorite tune on the record is Freedom. And the intro to that is absolutely gorgeous. You did an amazing job with that. It almost chokes me up every time. And the other thing is the tune, when I first heard it, I might have got a sneak preview on that, but that melody was stuck in my head forever. But usually when melodies get stuck in my head, I start to get disdainful, But that was like the best melody that could have been stuck in my head, because at the time I think it was like early May or whenever, and when I first heard it, and it was like, we were deep in the throes of this whole coronavirus thing, and people get real gloom and doom, you know what I mean? And I understand, you're in your house for 6 months or whatever it is. And, I felt like that was really it was really kind of an optimistic track. I don't know if you think about it like that, if you think about like optimism or pessimism in your music, but what brought that tune into existence? And is there anything you were thinking about, or did you just get a melody in your head, or what's the way you think about it?
Yeah, man. I mean, like just like the lyrics, like a lot of times I just write tunes. I just like sit at the piano and I play something, and then later on I think about like what type of emotion or what type of feeling like that those sounds evoke, and then that's how I usually end up titling the pieces. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So freedom to me, like just like like the chord progression is basically like, it's like a 4-1-4-1-5. That's like what it is for all the A sections. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, super creative, man. And but like it just sounds very like Western, very American, like very and it also has kind of like a certain patriotic feel to the way the melody is constructed. Mm-hmm. And there is like that hopefulness, So that's where like the title came from. I was like, there is like a certain, it sounds like, like the American dream, man. Like, like we have hope. We're going on to the frontier to forge a better life. This is,
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, so the sound of the music is what inspired the title. The title didn't inspire the sound of the music.
Cool. And it wasn't an idea in advance. It was this is the sound, and then you sort of had this picture come to you as a part of the, in writing the music and hearing the sound and everything.
Yeah, it's like, I just kind of sit down, I just start, just painting on the canvas, and then as things inspire me, I kind of just keep working with it. Mm-hmm. The intro actually was written like years later after the original melody. I wrote that melody right after I finished my undergrad, and that's part of the reason why I named it Freedom too, because I was like so happy to get the hell out of there.
Sure.
And
out of Juilliard, you're talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I wrote the intro later. I felt like it needed something else.
Sure, it brings it in well. Brings it in. How? What'd you think of studying at Juilliard? Was that were you anxious to get out because it was the end of your undergrad, or was it the vibe there?
No. No, I mean, at this point, like, I don't really have any like malice towards anybody or anything anymore. But like, there was like a very kind of toxic culture at the school, to be honest. Like a lot of the faculty members, I felt like were people there not because they wanted to teach, but because they thought it would help further their career. There's that diva syndrome where it's just like about me all the time. It's just, and to me, like, teaching is like one of those places where it's like, you really need to be there because you want to like impart knowledge, not just there because you think it's going to help you rub shoulders with other great jazz musicians and then get gigs,
Sure.
And so there was like, and then there was also like kind of sometimes a competitive spirit where it was almost like a certain jealousy from faculty to students. And then also there was just like, administrative kind of weirdness and stuff that would actually kind of pit the students after each other. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure. Yeah,
like where like you would feel like weird being friends with certain people because you would feel like it would affect your political status at this. You know what I mean? It was kind of like
it's just fun. I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying. It's just funny that
all of that being said, I wouldn't trade those 4 years and like I wouldn't erase it and try to do something else. I think that it was important for me to experience those types of things, and I still have a lot of great friends that I met there and a lot of musicians that I was able to play with and stuff that I'm really grateful for those experiences. However, it was rough. There was a lot of rough stuff,
Sure.
So
it's always interesting that how varied the cultures of different schools can be. I mean, it depends on all kinds of different things,
Yeah.
The region or whatever, the history, who knows. And Juilliard seems like that, and kind of an intense place, So I was interested in how people.
It's funny. It's funny what when I go there now, it seems like it's really chilled out a lot more. It seems like even the students. Like I mean, when I was in school, there were so many characters in school. Like just people like name a few. I don't know if you know Kyle Athade. He plays vibes on the album. Eddie Barbash is a sax player. He's played on the Late Show, and he's actually playing a lot of country music on saxophone now.
Oh wow.
Lucas Pino was there. John Batiste was there. Chris Bowers. Trying to think. I mean, there was a lot of people that were just very strong personalities, and it was just really this hilarious environment having all of these people that have you know what I mean?
Sure, no doubt.
Like all of these people you would never expect to see in the same room again now.
Right.
Because they all do such different things,
Mm-hmm. In my mind, that's a lot of the value of going to music school in some respects. You could just show up and study with somebody or study with a couple different people, but you show up to school and you meet all kinds of different people coming from different places, and it's kind of an interesting melting pot of different personalities, man. That's always a part of the thing,
Yep.
Listen, where'd you come up with the name for Jam Number 2 in C sharp minor?
Who knows? I mean, the idea was I would have these kind of jam sessions at my house all the time when I was in Miami. People would come over and we'd just hang out, have a couple drinks, and then we would just kind of naturally just start playing. And one of my friends that lives here in the city now, his name is Marius. He would come to my house and he would bring sometimes even a sousaphone with him.
Nice.
He'd bring a sousaphone and he'd have a backpack with a bunch of percussion instruments. And then everyone would be at the party. He would come in and start playing, and everybody's like, "Come on, man! What are you doing? What are you doing?" and then eventually someone else would go grab one, and then it would turn into this thing. And so a lot of times I would come up with these little piano riffs. I'd always be playing piano. I would come up with these little riffs that later on I would end up turning into tunes. And so I came up with 3 of them that I turned into tunes. And I was like, you know what? Maybe maybe this will be a little series, and I'll try to create 12 of these different tunes in all 12 keys. So this one's in C sharp. I have a big band chart that's in C sharp major. Then there's another one that's jam number 1 in C minor. So I have all these
it's a series.
And basically they're all just kind of they're basically supposed to be simple riff based tunes with simple chord progressions that are basically kind of just more about jamming rather than strict execution.
Sure. Do you feel like that gives you a different opportunity, because so often you're trying to be very precise about the music that you're writing, and you're writing for 7 people or a big band or whatever? Is it fun for you to just break it down and just do, all right, this is a simple repetitious thing and we're just going to have fun on it?
Yeah, it's nice,
Sure.
I mean, I like doing that. At the same time, though, then you start getting into what we were talking about with the groove-oriented stuff, where you want people that, even though it's really simple, you want people to just stick with that part so it really grooves. And then you end up coming across this other problem where now it's a simple tune, so now everyone wants to embellish a lot. Mm-hmm. So then it ends up developing into this complex thing anyway, even though it's supposed to be simple. You know what I mean?
Sure, right. Yeah. And in jazz world, it's easy to make things complicated when they could otherwise be simple.
Yeah.
There was for a long time I was writing. I found myself writing all non-net charts and big band charts or whatever I was doing, and so I put together this electric band. And I was like, all right, here's the deal. every tune is one line of music. So I wrote 7 tunes on a sheet of paper where it was just like the key and the bass line, and that's what we're dealing with. And it felt so liberating. You lose, of course, the control and being able to refine what it is that you're doing, but there's always something to like, all right, here's the deal. Like we're gonna just play, you know. That's cool, man. That's something else. Do you find now you've released the album now? How do you think about releasing music in 2020? Not 2020 particularly, but like, you know, do you find like some people talk about their albums as being business cards. Other people are like, this is my soul. This is like a piece of art that I've created in this one place. Like, are you thinking about it like, here's a bunch of tunes that I want to put out that reflects who I am? Or was this like, this is like a piece of art unto itself that wants to be listened to from start to finish?
To be honest, I was thinking about it more of just like, of like documentation. Like, you know, like I wanted to make sure that I had, like a record of like all of my music, you know, no pun intended, you know.
Sure. But that makes sense. Sure. Yeah.
So like, and that's part of the reason I didn't just record all of my newest stuff. Because like if I really wanted to come out and say, this is who I am as a musician, like this is exactly who I am, then I would have recorded the most recent stuff that I've come up with, because I think that would have been like given the clearest picture of who I currently am. But I mean, like my intention in the record was just to record music that sounds good and that hopefully people enjoy listening to. I didn't really have like any specific like, you know, super deep thing that I was going for. There wasn't any political, you know, agenda or anything. I'm just trying to make some music that's fun to listen to. That's, you know what I mean?
Cool.
And I wanted to make sure that I recorded all of my music that I think was worth recording before I move on to everything else, because then I know I'm never gonna record it. You know?
Sure.
Because like some of the stuff is already going on like 10 years old, so I wanted to make sure that it was documented. You know? Eventually, I hope that like my discography will catch up to like where I actually currently am, because I would like to eventually like make one of those records where like this is Javier Nero now, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I totally get that. That makes a lot of sense. So now, what's next? You've been writing. Do you regularly lead a big band? I know you have you write a lot of big band music. And what was it? A couple years ago, you won the Ithaca College Big Band composition competition, and then there was another one 2 years ago that you had in there. Do you have any aspirations to record a big band, or are you doing septet stuff, or what's the next project for you?
Shoot, I mean, I would love to do the big band stuff. I just think that it's going to be such an undertaking, and like my big band music is very difficult. It's just going to require like a lot of like rehearsal, a lot of time, and I don't know. I guess like I feel still like too afraid to try to do it yet.
Sure.
But like I mean I want to. I still have a lot of septet music too that needs to be recorded. I probably have like 2 or 3 albums worth of other septet stuff, more recent music that I'd like to record also, in addition to the big band stuff. But yeah, we'll
Great.
see.
Yep, we'll have to see how everything goes for the next little while, and well, I'll be looking forward to hearing what you come up with next.
Cool, man. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Do you have anything else you want to add? Anything else we should top off, close out with? Any life advice or profound comments or whatever?
I don't know, man. I guess not. Go check out my album. Everyone that's listening, go check out the music. I think there's something on there for everybody. People that don't even like jazz, I think will find at least a few tunes that they'll like. I think that's one of the advantages of the variety that's on the album, and I think it'll keep your interest. Like, I mean, yeah. So I mean, that's basically all I have to say.
Totally
the album's
agree.
the album's on all of the. Oh yeah, the album's on all of the major streaming sites: iTunes, Spotify. There's also tracks up on YouTube. I have videos on YouTube. Bandcamp, obviously, is actually probably the preferred place to buy it because
Buy the albums. Buy the
Yeah.
albums, everybody. Support the musicians. Buy some records, man. It's a big deal.
the Bandcamp version I have uploaded is actually a higher res version too, so that's also another reason it's preferable to go on there.
Nice. The perks. Great. Right on. Well, thanks a lot, Javier. Great talking to you, man. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on here.